Whether it's stocks, houses, or even crypto, history is just littered with these stories of speculative manias. Prices seem to just defy gravity, and then boom, they come crashing right back down to earth. And the thing is, these are not random events. They actually follow a surprisingly predictable pattern, and it's driven by one of the most powerful forces in any market, our own human psychology. All right, let's dive in and really unpack the anatomy of an economic bubble.
Okay, I know, it sounds like the setup to a really weird joke, right? But the answer tells you something fascinating about how markets and people work. Both of them were at the heart of these massive speculative bubbles, centuries apart, but they followed the exact same psychological script. It's wild.
So, what are we really talking about when we say bubble? Well, an economic bubble is simply what happens when the price of something, and it can be anything, gets completely detached from its real-world value. It's basically a collective belief system that just pushes prices to totally irrational heights. To really get our heads around this, we're going to use this fantastic framework from an economist named Hyman Minsky. He laid out 5 distinct stages of a bubble. And, it all starts with something he called displacement. So here it is. This is the 5-stage roadmap we're going to follow. Displacement, boom, euphoria, profit-taking, and the big one, panic. Let's start right at the beginning. Now, this is the crucial part. Every bubble starts with something real, and often something genuinely exciting. It could be a game-changing new technology like the internet was, or maybe a new government policy, or even just incredibly cheap money because of low interest rates. This totally legitimate shift creates a new and really compelling investment story. Okay, so once that initial spark is lit, it needs fuel to grow into a fire. And this is where we get into the next 2 phases, the boom and then euphoria. This is where a really good idea starts to morph into a dangerous obsession. So the boom. This is where things really start to pick up steam. The early investors are making a killing, the media starts talking about it nonstop, and a powerful new emotion enters the picture. Ah, yes, FOMO. This is a feeling we can all relate to, right? You see your friends, your colleagues getting rich off this hot new thing, and that fear of being left behind, it can be overwhelming. Suddenly, the rising price itself becomes the reason to buy, and that just creates this self-reinforcing loop. What's so interesting is how that boom phase just accelerates into full-blown euphoria. We are now at the absolute peak of the mountain. This is the point where all logic and reason just get tossed completely out the window. Right here, the whole mood of the market starts to change. That initial, genuine excitement from the boom period, well, it starts to twist into something way more intense, something totally ungrounded. And there it is. That's the turning point. We've gone from excitement to just outright delusion. People aren't investing based on fundamentals anymore. They are speculating based on pure, raw emotion. And there they are, the 4 most dangerous words in all of investing. I'm telling you, at the peak of every single bubble in history, you will hear people chanting this. It's the magic phrase they use to justify abandoning all the old rules, because this new paradigm has supposedly made them all obsolete. So how does this delusion actually work? Well, it runs on something called the greater fool theory. The idea is you might know deep down that an asset is ridiculously overpriced, but you buy it anyway because you're confident that there's an even bigger fool out there who's going to buy it from you for more money tomorrow. Just to give you a sense of how nuts things can get, during the dot-com bubble in the late 90s, there were companies with literally zero revenue, not a single dollar coming in, that were being valued at over $1 billion. $1 billion for just an idea. That, my friends, is euphoria. But right at the peak of all this madness, when it feels like the party is never going to end, something subtle starts to happen. The most experienced investors, the smart money, they start to see the writing on the wall. And that brings us to the profit-taking stage. Now, the crazy upward momentum starts to slow down, but not because of a crash. It's because the insiders are quietly, one by one, starting to head for the exits. This is such a critical moment. The general public, totally driven by FOMO, is still piling in, buying everything they can. And this provides the perfect cover for those early, sophisticated investors to cash out their massive profits. The buying pressure starts to fade, and the price starts to flatten out.
So once the selling from the insiders starts to outweigh the buying from the public, that bubble becomes incredibly fragile. It's really just waiting for a pinprick. And that leads us to the final and most dramatic stage.
And here we are, the final stage, panic. All it takes is one little trigger, a piece of bad news, some unexpected event, and the psychology just flips on a dime. Greed vanishes and it's replaced by pure fear. And this is the brutal dynamic of a crash. Everyone rushes to sell at the exact same time. But all those greater fools, they've disappeared. And what's worse, a lot of people had borrowed money to buy in. So as prices fall, they get a margin call from their broker demanding more cash. When they can't pay, they are forced to sell at any price, which just pushes the whole market down even faster.
So we've just walked through the 5 stages of how a bubble forms and bursts. But the bigger question is, why do they even happen in the first place? Well, it turns out you usually need 2 critical ingredients working together to create a true mania. On one hand, you need cheap credit. Simple as that. When money is easy and cheap to borrow, people are just way more willing to take huge risks. That's the fuel. But you also need a compelling story. That's the spark. A narrative like, the internet is going to change everything, is what lets people rationalize the insane prices. You absolutely need both for a bubble to really inflate.
So let's just quickly recap the whole journey. It starts with displacement, where a new idea and curiosity draw on the smart money. This builds into a boom, which is driven by excitement and a ton of media hype. Then comes euphoria, that period of delusion and mania. That's followed by profit-taking, as the cautious insiders start to sell, all before the final panic, when fear takes over and the whole thing comes crashing down.
And this brings us to the final and maybe most important takeaway. This 5-stage pattern isn't just some historical fun fact. It's a timeless map of market psychology. Learning to recognize these stages, the compelling news story, the shift from excitement to delusion, that classic cry of this time is different, that is the best tool you have to avoid getting swept up in the next mania. So the real question is, where do you see this pattern playing out right now?